Welcome to the Leaders Learning from Leaders podcast. Joining us today is Dr. Jason Andrews, the current superintendent of Windsor Central School District in New York State. Dr. Andrews was the New York State Superintendent of the Year in 2019, and he has served as the superintendent of Windsor Central for the past 18 years. Welcome, Jason.
Thank you very much.
As I did some preparation research for our conversation, I came across the information that you started your experience with school boards at a rather early stage. I'm wondering if you'd start us with that story.
Yeah, sure. So now, and seems even more ridiculous at the time when I was still a senior in high school and I was very active in things. We had a longtime superintendent, a veteran. Let's just say he was not particularly collaborative in his decision-making approach, had burned some bridges over the years, and there was a particular issue that arose that really got the community up in arms, and they had a big meeting. And I was the senior class president and the student council president, the honor society president. I'm there in this packed auditorium, people with quite literally their pitchforks and torches. And they were there really to not just discuss this particular issue, but really every issue that had happened in his 13 years as the superintendent. And so I remember one particular student getting up and speaking and screaming a series of profanities at the superintendent and saying she was speaking on behalf of the students. And I thought, well, I guess I should say something. And so I got up and I, at my, age of, I'm not sure if I was even 18 yet, but I proceeded to chastise the entire audience that we didn't see them at any of our activities. They didn't come to our games. They didn't come to our events, but now they came there. And
Wow.
So in the Hollywood version of that story, they, they look at one another and they say, that kid is right. That's really profound. They reflect and they say, that's not quite what happened though. So the crowd turned against me and yelled and screamed profanities at me. And I still remember this moment. It could have been last night. So this went on for hours, and this superintendent was just absolutely ridiculed in any way you can imagine. And really, he had created a lot of the issues. But so now they are going to go into executive session, which ultimately they did, and placed him on leave, and eventually there was a separation agreement and so on. But he pulled me aside in between the probably 2 to 3 hours of this public bashing. And he said to me, now when you're speaking in public and people aren't responding well, you just stay on message. Don't respond to them. And I still think about that.
Wow.
There he is. His career is really going up in flames, and he takes time to give me a little mentoring session.
A little coaching, yeah,
right.
Terrific.
And so he was placed on leave, and as the class president, I went to the board and said, look, this is the only superintendent we've ever had. In just a few months, we will be having our graduation. The class would like him to present us with our diplomas. And of course, the board said, absolutely not. And he will not be presenting you with your diplomas. And so I decided I'd run for the school board, and I ran for the board as a senior, actually against two of my friends' parents, which was interesting. And I was elected to the board while I was still in high school, and then I spent the next almost 8 years on the board, including
wow,
I think 4 years as the board president. So it was a great learning experience, but it was not. I wish it had been more strategic and said, I really someday want to be a superintendent. It was none of those things. I joke often, I went to SUNY Cortland as an undergrad, and with lots of education majors, that I often joke to say that was really my pickup line. You're an education major, but if you're looking for a job, I'm on the school board. So I don't know, I don't know that worked very well either. But I did
Well,
spend a lot of time, and really had a great experience. That learned a ton.
awesome story to go from there to years later being the superintendent.
Yeah, I joke about, but it's really true, because I went from the board right into administration. So for the entirety of my adult life, I have attended school board meetings once or twice a month, and so it's really a sad description of my social life. But that's I really have spent now over 30 years of school board meetings.
Wow. Would you tell us a little bit about the Windsor Central School District?
Yeah, sure. So we are in upstate New York. We border the city of Binghamton. We're just east of Binghamton. We're fairly large geographically. We encompass about 118 square miles. We have 5 schools, 3 elementary schools, 1 middle school, 1 high school. Approximately a little over 1,800 students is our current population. Kind of an interesting dynamic in that we are high poverty, and we tend to be relatively high performing. That's not always been the case, but really is a great district, and an incredibly talented staff. Lots of great opportunities for kids. So really a great place to be.
What would you point out as some of the key progress that the district has made in the more recent years?
Yeah, sure. So, we when we look at kind of the journey in that the district has been on now for some time, and I started working here as a high school social studies teacher and coach in 1997, and really what we were known for in those early days was boys athletics, and it was a very strong athletic programs, kind of for the boys' premier sports, but that's really what we were known for. Not a lot of focus on academics, and really since when I started in January of 2006, we've really tried to transform kind of the educational opportunities for kids. So some of the progress that we've made has been around some of those really measurable areas. We went from a 78% graduation rate in the early 2000s and 2005 to 95% graduation rate, 4-year graduation rate. We tend to rank at or near the top in our region on state assessments, and we used to be 13th out of the 15 in our region. But what we've really focused a lot on, beyond kind of we say that's kind of the proof of concept, is those objective measures. But when we look at a lot of the things, what we've really tried to do is focus on lots of opportunities for kids, and in particular, a number of, we have 8 pathways that we work toward with students from engineering and computer science and trades, agriculture, education, business, healthcare, et cetera. That it's really aligned pre-K through 12 to get kids lots of different exposure, different about 58% of our kids live in poverty. So the idea of getting kids on college campuses as early as 2nd grade, to get them out and visiting businesses, so that they start to really have this idea of there being a lot of different opportunities. So we start computer science in kindergarten. We start engineering in kindergarten. We start agriculture in kindergarten. We really try to get kids exposed to lots of things, and then provide them with the support so that they can have what we call a future ready plan. And so our high school, pretty small high school, just over 500 students in our high school. We have 37 college credit bearing courses for them within a variety of those pathways. So lots of great things. We've done a lot of progress of late, really, on our facilities. We've done now since 2006 about $100 million in upgrades to our facilities, really aligned to those pathways and the opportunities. So a whole lot of work going on. We've done a tremendous focus. We have a terrific team focused on mental health initiatives and what we're doing with social emotional learning and making sure just that this is a safe learning environment for all students, and building systems where there are daily check-ins with kids, but also kind of building those bigger supports. So, for example, we now have outside providers. We have mental health clinics in each of our 5 schools, and so a lot of kind of across the gamut of things that we've been working on for some time.
I'm hearing painting a picture of a possible future and then providing as many supports as you possibly can for kids to be able to build towards that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that, we are, and actually this sort of goes back to my school board piece. So it took me a very long time. I had been involved in the creation of our mission statement when I was on the school board. And it was one of the single worst experiences of my life. It was this 18 months of wordsmithing. And so I really said, never again are we going to be working on mission. But what we've really done is tried to create this very mission-driven organization. And we have I think a real clarity of that shared mission. And our mission statement, reflective of that shared mission here, is to ensure that each learner is future ready. And so that future ready can take a lot of different forms. We have many students that go on to very competitive 4-year universities. We have many students that go directly to the workforce, and in either case, they need to be ready, and that needs to be their plan. We're not going to decide what that destiny is for them. And what we really, when we look at, we focus a lot here on culture, and when looking at the idea of a culture of success, and a culture of success, you have high expectations, and we have high expectations. We have high expectations for our staff. I'll tell you, the board has very high expectations for me, and we hold people accountable for that. But if you're going to have a culture of success, then you have to have high levels of support too. So for staff, for students, for families, it's high expectations and high levels of support. So, you can't simply, say, well, we've exposed kids to these things, and now it's really up to them. Well, it is up to them, but they're still kids. We're gonna help them along and ensure their success.
I frequently struggle when I'm working with folks on mission and vision statements, and they use the phrase of providing the opportunity.
Yeah.
And that just comes up too short in my mind.
It's critical. It's, that to me, then we get out of our core purpose. The core purpose isn't to give the opportunity. Look, I have the opportunity to work out every morning. I have access to a gym. That doesn't mean I'm doing it. And I think that's, that idea of, and we phrase it in exactly the way you said. The other way that we phrase it is, in our district, is learning optional or required?
Gotcha.
And so what we've really worked hard to do is create a system where learning is required.
Yep. I'd like to toss this question out to you. If I had the opportunity to spend some time observing you in your leadership role, what do you think I'd likely identify as the approaches that you have to working with your district staff?
Great question. I guess I'd ask them. They'd say what a pain in the neck I am. Now, I think what you would see is some of that high expectations, high levels of support, but I also I've always been a big believer in if you want to control something, then do it. If someone is empowered to do their job. So if I wanted to still be the middle school principal, then I'd still be the middle school principal. If not, then I need to empower them to make decisions and make mistakes, and that I should be there to support and to be a thought partner. And if there's something that they need a decision or a directive, fine. But I think what you would see is, and we actually just had a leadership team meeting yesterday, and we were having this conversation about effective communication and really effective listening, and the distinction between hearing what someone says and truly listening to them, and listening to understand instead of listening to reply. And we discussed this idea of what I think you'd see. And sometimes this was part of the discussion. Sometimes I think there can be a sense of frustration. What I often do is ask them questions. And in fact, I have a little reminder by my phone that says questions, not answers. Because, we have a really incredible team. We've had some more recent transition. So I've got some newer leaders that don't have the same type of experiences that others, but really, I try to empower them to run their department or run their building, and I'm there to support them and to push them, but largely to get out of the way.
I read that you have a pretty strong commitment to the role of professional learning communities in schools, and I wondered if you'd expand and share your thinking about that with us.
Yeah, sure. So that's really and it goes to that whole idea of empowerment. Our collaborative teacher teams are really the engine that drives all the work that we've done. And it really goes back to, I was this sort of an accidental superintendent. I became the superintendent at age 30. I really, through a whole series of strange events, I did not aspire to it, certainly not at that stage. And I went and heard Rick DeFore speak for the first time and said, this whole PLC process really just makes great sense to me, and it could work well. And so in the spring of 2006, Rick and Becky DeFore came to Windsor High School and kicked this work off. And so we've really been focused on the PLC process and really developing this culture of collaboration since that time. And so, with that, there are really three big ideas of a professional learning community. The first is that focus on learning and not teaching. It's about the outcomes, not the inputs. And so really making that shift, that everything we really try to view through the lens of learning, that we don't have independent contractors here, that, there were two U.S. history teachers when I was a teacher in this building, and we were pleasant to one another, but we may as well have worked for completely different entities. And what students learned was completely dependent upon who their teacher was. And so we really have, again, built that collaborative culture. And that, just like learning is not optional, collaborating isn't either. And I think, that has been a long process, sometimes a painful process, that, forcing people to work together collaboratively can be tricky. But that has really been, a big part of the secret sauce. And then the third big idea is, it's about our results, not our intentions. And so, we really measure things. In fact, again, just at that leadership team meeting yesterday, we were talking about this great professional learning opportunity that a group of teachers had around instructing numeracy. And right away, our question was, all right, so what's the measurement of that? So how do we know what's our return on investment? And, how do we know that that's working? Not that they like it, not that they, found it enjoyable, but how do we know? And so, we've really been deeply committed to the PLC process now for about 17 years, and we're very fortunate that each of our 5 schools in our district have all been named model professional learning communities, and I'm even more fortunate in that I and a number of members of our team are associates for Solution Tree, and I have the opportunity to travel the country and work with schools around the PLC process and response to intervention and collaboration and so it's great. It's a great opportunity for me, but I learn a ton everywhere I go from all those places as well. So yeah, the PLC process has really been sort of that secret sauce in the work.
So as I heard you describe your leadership team in the district, I kind of have a sense that your leadership team functions as a PLC.
We do.
So it's in effect a model of the.
Yeah, we do. I mean, well, so here's what I would say, and certainly in the training. So the district is a PLC.
Gotcha.
Each of our teams, our leadership team included, engages in the PLC process. So we try to think of the PLC more as a verb than a noun, that it's what we do.
That's great.
When we're together.
I'm wondering what insights you've gained across your years regarding board and community relationships as part of your superintendent role.
Yeah, sure. So, school boards have an incredibly important impact and really set the tone. They're often, responsible in large part for the culture of the district. And I've been very fortunate. As I said, we have a board that has high expectations and unapologetically so, and I value that. But they also have had high levels of support. And, now in year 18, there's only one member of the board, and he's stuck with me. He's been now the president for 17 years. So he always says, when I go, he goes. But other than that, we've had, the board has turned over, but not in big ways. So, in fact, we just had our 17th uncontested board election. So we have had changes on our board, but we've never in the last 17 years had anyone run against anyone for our board. And so that board and that governance team, the board and the superintendent, are so important. And one of the things that I do, and along with, and I know your guest on the last episode, my good friend and colleague Kevin McGowan, work a lot with school boards and governance teams, really in some of that clarity of their role, because the boards have incredibly important roles, but their roles are not to make the day-to-day operational decisions. And I think when you have a group of people elected by the community to really look at things like mission and vision and those core values and the goals, not the means, not how are we going to accomplish that. But when you have a board that is really focused on those things, then I think it makes a tremendous amount of difference for districts. And so, I think in the last year and a half or so, I think I've worked with about 35 different school boards, and you see a wide spectrum of people for sure, but it becomes really obvious to me pretty quickly in terms of what the focus in that district is based on those board level conversations, and those that are focused on learning, those that are focused on results. I think you can see that and feel it very quickly. And then that really permeates through the whole district. So that board role, and I think from a superintendent standpoint, it's one of the things that people are least prepared for when they become superintendents, because they think, I've attended a lot of board meetings, so I know what it's like to work with a board. And I think, you're very, you're in this really interesting position because, I'm very clear on the fact I work for the board. My contract is with the board. I'm the only direct employee of the board.
Mm-hmm.
At the same time, I have to manage the board. So you're managing this group of people that you're also working for. And that can be a tricky dynamic, for sure. Again, we could not have done the work here and really changed the trajectory of the district without that board support and input, but also their engagement. And so, the things that we share with the board are about learning. What we share with the board is about results and at that governance level. And so that I think is just a hugely important piece and often is missing.
Am I safe to say that part of the role you're taking on is guiding the conversations, seeing that the board gets engaged in the important conversations,
and providing them with the information that they need? I think that's you can in a format. So it's really interesting in New York and really, other states too, the format that things are required to be provided to the board and are really not governance level formats. And so, we can sort of grouse about that, or we can turn information into governance level. And so, for example, we do something in our district throughout the course of the year called State of the Building or State of a particular department. So every building and every department, there's a very tight template that they do a report on the state of that department. So it can be the state of the high school or the state of athletics or the state of the arts or the state of technology or the state of Palmer Elementary. And they really, again, look at that learning data and then share with them successes and challenges and plans. And so that board members can see where we're headed. We do a monthly what we call the district overview report that can give them kind of the snapshot of here we are financially. Here's what's happened with enrollment. Here's what what changes you might have seen. Just a one shot, and then quarterly we really look at data and student performance data from the standpoint of, okay, so what did course failures look like? What about disciplinary pieces? But at that district level, governance level piece, and part of that I learned here as a teacher. I remember vividly there was too much failure going on was the take of board members. I was just a teacher. I don't even know who was on the board then. And the data that would be provided to the board was any teacher in any course at the quarter report cards that had more than 10% of kids failing, and they would get a letter from the board. And I remember so vividly the union leader at the time saying, so make sure you do the math so that you don't have more than 10% of kids. It really had nothing to do with that learning piece versus saying, here in our latest quarter, at our latest administration of our benchmarking, this is the percentage of kids that were at grade level for reading, or this is the percentage of kids for numeracy. And then to say, and that compares to last year, here's where we were. We don't say in Mrs. Jones's class, there were this many, or even in this building versus that building. That's my job, not the board's job. And so, and it's the teacher's job to figure out how many kids and what are we doing for them, and our collaborative teams, not alone. They don't determine that alone. So I think that a lot of that guiding of the conversation is really creating structures that I'm not the one that has to say anything, but that we know everybody knows when the state of athletics report will be. So rather than it being this open forum, I've got some concerns about the spring sports. They didn't win championships, although our softball team is in the state quarterfinals right now, so or semifinals. So we're hopeful, but they know they're going to get the information at a governance level, and I can tell you what meeting that will be at. So I think we've tried to be really deliberate about controlling the narrative, not so much from a messaging, but here is a logical way that you're going to get information that can help. And by the way, you're going to help us to say, that's not good enough for our community, or whatever that is. So they will push us with their questions.
I got two questions left here, if you'll can stay with me. The first one's, I'm wondering, with your experience and looking at where we're at now, are there a couple of items that you think are a couple of items that schools in general are going to need to be facing as we move forward today?
I do. I think we're at this really interesting time in just in society in general. I think that there is more sort of cultural conflict than I've ever seen outside of school.
Yep.
In schools, you walk the halls and it feels pretty good. It's interesting, what people outside and I often laugh. I have a bunch of brothers and older brothers who none of whom are in education, but also none of whom are in the public sector. And I laugh when we get together about the fact that we will have these conversations about what schools ought to be doing and what's happening in schools. And I'll say, when was the last time any of you were in a school? And I think that there's this real polarization in society that is now permeating schools and school boards for sure. And I think the unfortunate part is that it's largely based on misinformation and inaccuracies, and some of the thoughts that schools are indoctrinating kids with this or they're doing that, and so I think that's a real challenge. And even some of the reactions. So we do an annual part, and one of our annual goals is around school climate. And so we do an annual survey of students and staff and parents regarding school climate. And the visceral reaction that we get from some parents about, how dare you ask? And I look at some of the things like, how dare you ask if my kid feels safe in school? I mean, so I think that's a big issue that at some point is going to have to resolve itself. And so, I don't know what the answer to the whole polarization of society is. Boy, if I did, I'd.
But schools are going to have to address it.
I think so, because schools are always going to be a reflection of the communities that they're in, and so that polarization that's happening in the community is certainly happening in the school as well. I think. And I could talk about learning gaps and all those things, but I think the other thing, just more globally, that has to be resolved in some way is, and when we think of it through that PLC process, critical question too, how do we know students are learning? And that really gets this whole ongoing, generational debate about assessment and what does that mean for state testing and federal testing and local, but really trying to get to, how do we know kids are learning the things that they need to be learning? Because too often, we focus on just the anecdotals. And, I know when I was a high school teacher, I was very clear. we were doing our very best in the high school to undo the damage of the middle school. And we were sent kids that were terribly unprepared, and they just didn't have any standards in the middle school. And then I became the middle school principal, and I learned right away, people were working really hard to undo the damage of elementary teachers. And then I became the superintendent and realized elementary teachers are doing Herculean work to undo the damage of parents.
Yeah.
I do a lot of work with workforce, and I'm on our local community college board of trustees, and the things they say about high school, and what does the four-year university say about the community college. And I think at some point, rather than assuming everyone else in the system is inept, we have to have some clarity about what is it that we're really looking for. And I find some of it to be funny because, with workforce, they'll say, what we really need, what we really want you to teach kids is things like being on time. I said, have you ever been in a school? Like, there are literally bells to follow their day, to be on time. Like, of course we work to teach them about being on time, or, we just want you to teach them work ethic. Well, of course we want. So, and really trying to get more granular to say, as an ecosystem, what is it that we're really trying to accomplish here, and how will we know that we're making progress toward that?
Well, I thank you so much. As we look to close out, I'm wondering if you've got one or two pearls of wisdom that you'd like to pass on to the many new people who are moving into school leadership these days.
Boy, I don't really have any pearls of wisdom. What I will say is this: leadership is hard, but that's hard in any field. And I think that when I look at the trajectory and now, as I'm nearing the end, I've got a ways to go yet. But when I look at my whole career, this is now 26 years. I don't plan to work another 26. So I'm on the downhill slide. I'm nervous about the fact that, because of going back to some of that polarization and some of those visceral reactions, that people are being turned away from leadership. But, I think it's so critically important that we have good leaders, and it's really fulfilling. And so what I would say, I guess as a pearl is, it's worth it. When I look at, and it's a bit unusual to be in the same district in this role for this many years. But when I look at where we were and where we are, and I look at opportunities that kids are having, I mean, our team here, and I mean that from, our food service and transportation and, support staff, clerical, teachers, and certainly our administrators. Our team has transformed, really, I would argue, this whole community. And that's incredibly, I think, rewarding. And I think, sometimes when people come and go, and they might get a little taste of that. But I would just tell people, I think, to stick with it and focus on the impact that can be made.
The phrase I'm hearing is, it's hard work that can feel good.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. I'm, if you think about, risk reward, there's a whole lot of reward to it.
Well, Jason, thank you so much. I really appreciate the time and the thinking that you've shared with us here on the podcast.
Well, it's been an absolute pleasure, and thank you so much for the opportunity.